You know those days when you wake up and before anything has even happened, you feel you have nothing to give, not to your work, not to your creativity, not even to life itself. And it's not exhaustion, it's not lack of ideas, it's something that you sense is deeper and in your core as if it's gone offline. And that's where I found myself recently. And I realized I could have pushed forward, forced momentum, but something in me knew that if I did that, I'd just be moving further away from what was really going on inside me. And it wasn't about a lack of discipline. It felt deeper, like the part of me that gives meaning to everything I do was feeling suffocated. And I couldn't work out exactly why. So I stepped back and I realized this isn't exactly unique. It's something so many of us are experiencing as modern creators. A life flooded by input, pressurized to output, where the connection to our own creative spirit starts getting drowned out. So in this video, I want to show you how I stopped, mapped what was happening, and began to re-establish a contact with my own center of meaning. And I'm going to take you through the exact exercise that helped me process this, reset, reconnect, and figure out how to move forward. And by the end, my hope is you won't just hear my story, but you'll recognize your own and begin your own return. So in entering the office and finding this void inside myself, my immediate response was to trigger my default, write a list, find a task, get into action, discover meaning through the act of just getting on with it. But a creative life can quickly become dominated by this compulsion to do. We're urged everywhere to act, to rise at 4 a.m., compress our timelines, and cast ourselves as the heroes of our own productivity narratives. Why then was I feeling so out of kilter by, it seemed, doing everything right? But in that moment, I realized something deeply uncomfortable. Action had become my safety net. Simply put, I was using action as a way to avoid the very thing that I most needed to hear inside myself. I've had a good few months, strong rhythm with his YouTube channel and Substack, solid client work, even getting down to the gym most days. Yet none of that told the full truth, which began dawning on me, that productivity was somehow disguising a deeper disconnection. So I had this revelation that you can be performing so well on the outside, right at the time that you're drifting on the inside. And that's when it hit me. I just feel blocked. In my case, musically, somewhere I'd let everything in life find its way to get in front of my central mission. And more so, I had the sense that this is something that so many of us are actually going through. But the question is, why? To understand what was happening, I went over to my newly installed whiteboard. Now, this is the exact exercise I want you to try. I drew a circle, and in the center I wrote the word me, and I just sat with it for a moment, and I realized it didn't feel right. The word me was tangled up with everything I do, my roles, my responsibilities, opinions, income, even my tax number. It was the surface of my life. So I wiped it away, and I wrote I. And that one shift felt really rooting and representative of what my therapist used to call the potential true self. So this I at the center wasn't the persona I show the world or the ego that has to get things done. It was what Jung calls the self, the total field of possibility within you, your center of being. Now around it, I sketched the next ring: work, obligation, expectation, and beyond that, the outermost layer, the technological layer of metrics, social media, consistency, visibility, the pressure to perform, and so on. And seeing it all before me, I felt this sense of revelation, like I could see what was happening clearly at last. I wasn't empty, I was flooded. Not just by what I needed to do, but by the constant pressure of who I felt I needed to be in order to keep everything moving. Identity entangled with performance. What I felt I'd stumbled across was a visualization of the psychic condition of our time, where too often our identity has become entangled with performance. At some point, during the rise of social media, how we feel in ourselves started to become confused with how our digital output is performing. And in this weird mental shift, every metric becomes a mirror. Every reaction becomes a verdict. Moreover, we're flooded by both the ubiquity of news, content from the outside, but with it also the need to be always outputting too. As one person said to me, it doesn't exist unless it's on YouTube. And the result of this is the self has no capacity to breathe whatsoever. My own response to this has been to resist shallow performative culture by committing to long-form expression through my newsletter on Substack, this YouTube, and the podcast. And while long-form does create depth and meaning, it also comes with a cost. It takes time, it takes energy, and if you're not careful, even the meaningful work becomes yet another treadmill, demanding more from the very core it was meant to actually protect. The consequences of this inner flooding are profound. You feel this loss of meaning, disconnection from joy, creative paralysis. And the block is not a lack of creativity, it's the self refusing to participate in a life misaligned with its own truth. So it was at this point that I recognized this wasn't just a personal slump, it was a psychic signal. So I turned to Jung, not for theory, but to understand why my deepest creative energy had withdrawn. So what did Jung have to say? Well, he says that a block is a message, not from your conscious mind, but from the deeper self that holds your total potential. When your path drifts away from who you're meant to become, that deeper self will withdraw its energy. So an example of this would be the writer who's publishing every week on Substack, growing their audience, staying consistent, yet hasn't touched the novel they know they're somehow meant to write. Or the musician who's posting daily clips, doing all the right promotional work, Instagram, etc., but hasn't actually sat at the instrument and felt something in a really long time. The creative machine keeps running, but the self has already stepped away. So the self's withdrawal isn't a form of punishment, which is how we experience it, but actually a way to call you back to yourself. The musical example is what actually fits my current state, which I'll dive into in the next video. But for now, the question we have to face is this. When we're feeling cut off from our creative self, then how do we find a way back to it? My recent conversation with myself helped me realize that on these days, when we feel we have nothing left to give, it's easy to conclude that something is wrong with us, that we've lost discipline, lost motivation, lost even our creative spark altogether. God, you feel so far away from it that you forgot that it ever existed in the first place. But in my experience, the block is not a malfunction, it's a form of the soul's protest. It's the self refusing to continue under conditions that no longer seem to fit. And so the question is not, how do I push through this like everyone says, but rather, how do I return to the center of who I am? Because sometimes you have to stop the compulsion to produce in order to hear what your deeper self is actually asking you to make. Modern culture tells us that creation for creation's sake is always good, that consistent output is the measure of commitment. But what looks like productivity can in fact be the revelation of a fractured self, one that is always outputting, always performing, but no longer listening to what is calling from within. The work now is not to force more action. The work is to rebuild the connection to the source from which all true creation flows.